You know the sound of a match being struck? That small, sharp spark before everything flares. That's what happened when Dominique Sachse quietly dedicated a recent episode of her podcast Over 50 and Flourishing to Charlie Kirk. It wasn't unprecedented. Public figures give tributes all the time, but this one detonated something underneath. A fault line in how we expect grief, politics, identity, and media to intersect. What should have been a moment of comfort instead revealed just how volatile the lines between faith, politics, and public expectation have become. Dominique Sachse is familiar to many. Former news anchor turned content creator, lifestyle and self-help voice, someone who builds spaces of encouragement, decorum, beauty, spirituality. Her audience trusts her for warmth, positivity, personal growth. Then came the news. Charlie Kirk, young, provocative, conservative activist, was murdered. And Dominique, in her episode titled Finding Faith and Hope in Difficult Times, opened with a pause. She said, in light of the tragic death, so many are carrying grief, fear, questions. She invited listeners to lean in, not into politics, but into faith, healing, community. Guests included therapists, ministers, voices meant for comfort, not argument. Her intention, to create a non-political space, a faith-based pause in chaotic times. Yet the reaction was immediate, loud, and sharply divided. Some thanked her. Finally, someone speaking to the heartache, the fear, they said. Others bristled. Why this tribute and not others? Why honor Charlie Kirk when many tragedies go unmentioned? Why now? And why in this tone? On social platforms, comments poured in. Selective sympathy is gross, wrote one viewer. What about the children in Gaza? What about school shootings? Another said, I'm unfollowing. This feels like a shift into religion, politics I didn't sign up for. Supporters responded in kind. You are a calm voice in the storm. Thank you for honoring someone's life. Faith matters in tragedy. So what made this particular shout-out catch fire? Why did Sachse's call for reflection and healing strike so many as controversial rather than consoling? The answer lies in several overlapping forces: identity, expectation, politics, timing, and the fragile space in which public figures now move. First, the identity Sachse carries. She built a brand that promises growth, spirituality, healing. Many followers come for fashion tips, home ideas, encouragement. They don't necessarily want political flashpoints. When their trusted voice pauses to eulogize someone polarizing, even in death, it feels like stepping over a line. For some audience members, it's not just what she said, it's what they perceive she allowed herself to feel. In polarized times, grief isn't neutral. It often requires side choosing, or at least that's what many believe. Second, the political weight of Charlie Kirk himself. He was never a neutral figure. His speeches, his activism, controversies, all of them made him a lightning rod. So even a tribute meant to be non-political is interpreted through political filters. For some, honoring him means implicitly aligning with his beliefs. For others, it's simply acknowledging human loss. The problem is, in our current climate, that distinction is often lost or refused. Third, expectations and consistency. People ask, has she done similar tributes for other victims? Did she use her platform for other tragedies? Many felt that other losses, especially those affecting marginalized groups, rarely receive the same level of emotional space. That perception of inconsistency feeds criticism. Why now, when this person triggers less backlash from certain parts of the audience or aligns more with certain political values? Fourth, timing and the emotional landscape. When someone beloved or divisive dies, there is public demand for response. Silence is judged. Speaking is judged. It's a no-win situation. Sachse chose to speak. She chose comfort. But that very choice became part of the controversy. Listeners, followers, viewers see tributes as symbolic. What you say, when you say it matters. And in a moment of national or community mourning, every word is weighed, every omission noticed. Fifth, the persistent erosion of safe spaces. Audiences once could trust that certain platforms or creators would stay in defined lanes. Lifestyle here, politics there, faith over there. But the lines blur. Many creators now are expected to handle everything. Grief when tragedy strikes, political nuance when ideology is challenged, moral voice when injustice occurs. Sachse's episode revealed how little room public figures have to simply be human, to mourn, to reflect, to invite peace, without being pulled into the tug-of-war between political tribes. But let's zoom in on what was said. Sachse explicitly avoided political discourse. Her guests were counselors and ministers. The framing was faith, hope, emotional resilience. Yet some listeners claimed that avoidance of politics is itself political, that choosing which tragedies to address or whom to mourn publicly is a political act. Criticism didn't focus just on content, but on the decision to center Charlie Kirk among grief, to offer him a platform in her space. Even the faith-based lens came under scrutiny. Is faith a neutral shelter or a cultural identity signal? For many, it feels like the latter. Then there's social media, where everything is magnified. Clips get shared, quotes get taken out of context, emotions get amplified. A kind sentence can become controversial if someone's past comments are recalled. A mournful moment can become political theater if someone claims it's performative. Sachse's followers, some deeply invested in her identity as apolitical or lifestyle-oriented, saw this episode as a pivot. Others saw it as reasonable, honest, compassionate. The context they brought carried the weight. Also important, the role of audience segmentation. Dominique Sachse has a diverse audience, from people who share her faith and sense of tradition, to those who followed her for style, beauty, self-help. These segments expect different things. When someone they look to makes a move into territory they didn't expect, friction emerges. Some felt betrayed, others felt supported. It's a reflection of the broader segmentation in digital media. Different people expect different things of public figures, and alignment is never guaranteed. So the shoutout blew up because it touched on all these tensions. It wasn't just one thing, it was grief. It was politics. It was identity. It was expectation. And it was timing. And in those intersections, clarity is hard and criticism is fast. Now, what does this moment suggest about where we are? It suggests that we are in a cultural age where public figures' gestures of grief are no longer neutral. They are seen as statements. It suggests that audiences expect consistency, not just in messaging, but in moral witness. It suggests faith and identity are deeply entangled with politics, whether or not someone intends them to be. And it suggests that even those who wish to steer clear of political storms are often caught anyway, simply by expressing empathy or offering comfort. As the backlash continues, Sachse must decide how to proceed. Does she respond by doubling down on the message clarifying intent, reaffirming that this is not a political endorsement? Does she broaden her coverage, giving tributes to others, showing a more expansive empathy so the criticism of selective grief is less sharp? Or does she retreat, returning to content that avoids public grief or controversial figures to stay safer with her base? There's also the question of long-term brand risk. Some followers will stay, some will leave, some will respect the courage of taking a stance, some will see it as a misstep. In digital media, risk is part of visibility. Controversy can amplify reach, but it can also erode trust. Sachse's niche has always been trust, warmth, authenticity. These moments test whether those qualities survive when the audience divides. Finally, there is a deeper question for all of us observing. How do we want public grief to work in society? Should death of a public, polarizing figure be allowed to just be mourned, to prompt reflection across divides? Or do we demand that mourning come with boundaries, political or moral litmus tests, consistency checks, identity checks? If we demand the latter, we may lose something essential, the capacity to grieve imperfectly, to comfort, to see sorrow without having to filter it through our ideological lens. If this story matters to you, don't let it slip by as just another internet moment. Talk about it, share the episode. Ask someone, how do you decide when reactions like this are fair and when they're unfair? If you believe in allowing people spaces to grieve authentically, even if you disagree with them politically, then speak up. If you want creators to feel safe to express compassion without being dragged into controversy, support them. Like, subscribe or follow those voices who try to hold space and encourage empathy over division. And above all, reflect. In your own circles, how often do we allow grief? And how often do we demand conformity before mourning? Because behind this curtain is a choice. To see people, flawed and complicated, or to see only symbols and labels. Choose seeing.